Hey guys, tonight we're going to talk about something that shouldn't exist. We're going to park ourselves on a quiet suburban street, one that looks just like yours, and wait. We're waiting for 3 a.m. We're waiting for a sound that crawls out of the deepest part of the night, a sound that promises childhood joy but delivers something else entirely. Imagine it, the faint, tinny jingle of an ice cream truck, its melody warped and sour, slowly creeping down your silent street when the only things that should be moving are shadows and bad dreams. A neighbor, brave or foolish, pulls back the curtain to see it roll past, a lumbering, pastel phantom, but there's no one in the driver's seat. And as it passes under a streetlight, the serving window is just a black square, and the back doors, they swing open, revealing a darkness so total, so absolute, it seems to drink the light around it. The sheer wrongness of it, the perversion of a cherished memory into a nightly dread, is a special kind of terror. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your location and the time where you are in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It begins with you. It begins in that fragile state between wakefulness and sleep, in a house on a street that prides itself on its quiet predictability. Cedar Lane. Even the name sounds safe, doesn't it? Sturdy, rooted, calm. The lawns are manicured, the recycling bins are put out on time, and the loudest sound, after 10 o'clock, is usually the click of a thermostat. You're lying in bed, the digital clock on your nightstand glowing a soft, unobtrusive red. It's 2:58 a.m. You've woken for no reason. You can name a slight shift in the house's settling groans, a dream that evaporated the instant your eyes opened. You roll over, trying to coax sleep back, listening to the gentle hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the whisper of the air through the vents. These are the sounds of home, the familiar audio blanket of security. And then, a new sound joins the quiet symphony. It's so faint at first, you think you're imagining it. A thin, metallic melody, like a wind-up music box being played miles away. You hold your breath, straining to hear. Is it a neighbor's phone? A television left on? Number. It's getting closer. The tune is simple, a nursery rhyme, but something is profoundly off. It wavers and bends, hitting notes that feel physically uncomfortable, like a nail scraping slowly across a chalkboard. The sound seems to pull and stretch, as if the air itself is warping around it. The clock on your nightstand clicks over. 3 a.m. Right on cue, the music swells, now loud enough to be unmistakable. It's the jingle of an ice cream truck. Your mind struggles to process the absurdity. An ice cream truck? Now? In the dead of night? In the middle of the week? It's a violation of the natural order of things. Ice cream trucks belong to sun-drenched summer afternoons, to the laughter of children and the sticky heat of July. They do not belong here, in the cold, sterile silence of 3 in the morning. You slip out of bed, your feet silent on the cool floorboards, and creep to the window. You part the blinds just a crack, your heart starting to beat a little faster, a little harder. There, at the far end of the street, a pair of headlights cuts through the darkness. The vehicle is moving slowly, almost mournfully, its pastel-painted sides catching the intermittent glow of the streetlights, a rolling ghost of summer. The tune it plays is Pop Goes the Weasel, but it's a version you've never heard. It's a corrupted file, a broken music box playing its last agonizing tune. What most people don't know is that the song itself has a darker history than its cheerful melody suggests. It isn't about a playful animal. Historians believe the 19th century lyrics were about the crushing cycle of poverty in London. Popping the weasel was slang for pawning one's coat, the last valuable possession, just to survive another week. It was a song of desperation, a jingle of ruin, and hearing it now, twisted and broken in the dark, it feels like it's reclaiming its grim origins. There's a strange, almost forgotten local anecdote about the land Cedar Lane was built on. Before the developer broke ground in the late 60s, A portion of the area was used as the wintering grounds for a small, traveling carnival that went bankrupt in the Depression era. Old-timers who lived on the outskirts of town back then used to tell stories of hearing strange, disembodied calliope music drifting from the abandoned, overgrown fields on windy nights, faint, melancholic tunes from rides that had long since rusted into the earth. They were dismissed as ghost stories, of course, the products of overactive imaginations. But as you stand at your window, listening to this impossible music, you can't help but wonder if some memory of that place, some residue of its lost and lonely sound, has lingered in the soil itself. The truck crawls closer, its speed unnervingly steady. The music seems to vibrate in your teeth, a low, resonant hum that gets under your skin. And as it passes directly in front of your house, you get your first clear look. The paint is chipped and faded, depicting cartoon animals whose smiles look more like grimaces in the sodium lamp orange. The serving window is a dark, uninviting rectangle, but it's the driver's cabin that makes the breath catch in your throat. It's empty. There is no silhouette, no shadow, no hint of a person behind the wheel. The truck glides past, a self-propelled hearse for childhood dreams, and continues its slow, inexorable journey down the street. The dissonant melody begins to fade, receding back into the distance, leaving only a profound and ringing silence in its wake. You stand there for a long time, staring out at the empty street. Did you just dream that? A waking nightmare? But the unsettling feeling, the cold dread coiling in your stomach, is all too real. And it raises a terrifying question, one that will keep you awake until dawn. Why do the things that haunt us so often choose to wear the masks of our happiest memories? What is the purpose of twisting something so innocent into a symbol of pure, inexplicable dread? The silence that floods back into the street is heavier than before. It's a weighted blanket of quiet, pressing down on the houses, on the manicured lawns, on you. You finally let the blind fall back into place, the soft clack of the plastic startlingly loud in the stillness of your room. Your own breathing seems intrusive, but the music hasn't really gone. It has left an echo burned into your auditory cortex, a ghost of a melody that still plays if you just listen hard enough to the silence. You walk back to your bed, but you don't get in. You just sit on the edge, tracing the patterns on your comforter, trying to piece together what you just heard. It was Pop Goes the Weasel, of that you're certain, but it was a version that had been fundamentally broken. The tune was there, the skeletal structure of it, but the notes were wrong in a way that goes beyond being merely off-key. Some notes were held for far too long, stretching until they sounded like a metallic scream. Others were clipped short, choked off before they could fully form. And in between the recognizable notes, there were other smicrotones, discordant slips, sounds that don't belong on any musical scale known to man. It was as if the music was being played on an instrument that was in agony. It was the sound of a memory being corrupted in real time, the happy, bouncing tune of a summer day being dragged through mud and rust and time. The psychological effect is insidious. It's not just fear. Fear is a sharp, clean emotion. This is something muddier, more pervasive. It's a deep, gnawing unease. A profound sense of melancholy has settled over you, a sadness for something you can't name. The music felt lonely, desperate. It was a call that expected no answer. As you sit there, the phantom jingle replaying in your mind, you feel a chill that has nothing to do with the temperature of the room. It's a coldness that blooms from the inside out, a feeling of being watched not by eyes, but by a sound. This brings to mind the strange science of acoustics and fear. There's a documented phenomenon known as infrasound low-frequency sound that exists below the range of normal human hearing, typically under 20 Hz. While you can't consciously hear it, your body can feel it. The vibrations can affect your organs, your vision, your state of mind. In the late 1990s, a team of British researchers conducted an experiment where they laced a concert with these ultra-low frequencies and then surveyed the audience. A significant portion of the concertgoers reported feeling inexplicably anxious, sorrowful, or even terrified during the parts of the show where the infrasound was present. They felt a presence in the room. This has led some paranormal investigators to theorize that certain haunted locations aren't haunted by spirits, but are simply afflicted with a source of natural infrasound wind whistling through a specific crack in a window, the hum of distant industrial machinery that creates the physiological sensations we associate with ghosts. The truck's jingle was audible, yes, but what if the distorted, dragging quality of the music was a carrier wave? What if woven within that broken melody were frequencies specifically designed to bypass your ears and manipulate your emotional state directly to make you feel that primal, inexplicable dread? You're not the only one who feels it. In the coming days, you'll hear snippets of conversation. A neighbor mentioning to another over a fence that he's been having terrible nightmares. The woman across the street complaining of a sudden bout of anxiety she can't shake. They don't connect it to the sound. Most of them will claim they never heard it. But the feeling is there. A low-grade emotional poison seeping into the neighborhood. There's one person, though, who hears it and recognizes it on a deeply personal level. Old Mr. Henderson, who lives at the corner, a man who has lived on this street since before it was even fully paved. He confides in his daughter, who later tells the story at a neighborhood block party with a nervous laugh. He told her the sound reminds him of the bell from the old St. James Church before it was torn down. A crack had formed in the bronze after a lightning strike in the 50s, and for years, until they finally demolished the building, its hourly chime was a discordant, mournful clang that he said sounded like God was crying. He says the truck's music has that same broken-hearted quality. It's the sound of something that was once meant to be beautiful, now forever damaged. This is the true horror of the melody. It doesn't just scare you, it infects you with its own sorrow. The warped notes seem to be searching for a sympathetic resonance within you, looking for your own secret sadness, your own hidden fractures. It feels like it wants to connect, to be understood. As you finally climb back under the covers, the sky just beginning to pale with the false dawn. You pull the blankets up to your chin. The music is an invitation, a call. It's not just passing through, it's on a route. It's looking for something, or someone. The distorted, dragging notes are a question being asked over and over again. And as you lay there, caught between the memory of the sound and the oppressive silence it left behind, you have to ask yourself, can a sound truly be haunted? Not just a recording of a voice from the past, but the melody itself? Can a collection of frequencies be imbued with an intention, a will, an emotional residue so powerful that it can reach out across the years and force you to feel its own specific curated despair? Or is it something worse? Something that has simply learned which notes to play to unlock the darkest, saddest rooms inside the human soul? The second night is worse. The second night, you're waiting for it. You're not woken from a deep sleep by a faint, encroaching sound. You're wide awake, propped up on your pillows, your eyes fixed on the red numbers of the clock as they tick towards 3 a.m. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside is a potential prelude, a false start that makes your muscles tense. This is the difference between being ambushed and lying in wait for the monster. The dread is no longer a surprise. It's a slow, marinating anxiety. You've told yourself it was a dream, a hallucination, a bizarre prank. You've rationalized it a dozen different ways throughout the day, but none of the explanations have stuck because you know what you saw, or rather, what you didn't see. 2:59 a.m. The silence outside feels absolute, a vacuum. You hold your breath. The clock clicks over. 3 a.m. And there it is, faint, distant, but undeniable. The same broken-hearted rendition of Pop Goes the Weasel, crawling out of the darkness from the far end of Cedar Lane. The sound seems to physically push the silence ahead of it, an invading force. Your heart doesn't just beat faster. It begins to thud with a heavy, sickening rhythm against your ribs. You promised yourself you wouldn't look. You told yourself to stay in bed, to put your pillow over your head, and wait for it to pass. But you can't. The need to see, to confirm, is a magnetic pull you are powerless to resist. You slide out of bed and return to your post at the window. You part the blinds just a sliver, the same as last night, and there it is. The same faded pastel truck. Its single headlights cutting a weak, jaundiced path through the gloom. It moves at that same funereal pace, a slow, deliberate crawl. The distorted music washes over the street, an invisible tide of wrongness. It's louder tonight, or maybe you're just more attuned to its foul frequency. As it draws nearer, you focus with an intensity that makes your eyes water. You stare at the driver's side of the cab, your entire consciousness narrowed down to that one patch of glass. You're looking for a shape, a shadow, a silhouette, anything to prove there's a human engine behind this phenomenon. A teenager with a twisted sense of humor, a disgruntled former ice cream vendor, anyone. The truck passes directly under the streetlight in front of your house, the moment you've been waiting for. The overhead sodium lamp floods the cab with a harsh, revealing light, and you see it. With perfect, horrifying clarity, you see absolutely nothing. The driver's seat is vacant. The steering wheel is starkly visible, untouched. There is no one there. The wheel doesn't move, yet the truck maintains its perfectly straight, impossibly slow trajectory. It's not just that there's no driver. It's the emptiness itself that is so terrifying. It's a pristine vacuum, a space that should be occupied, but isn't. The sight breaks a fundamental law of your understanding of the world. Cars need drivers. It's a simple, inviolable rule. And what you are witnessing is the casual, silent, and utter breaking of that rule. This moment of confirmation is a specific kind of horror. It's the transition from, "this is strange," to, "this is impossible." Cognitive dissonance floods your brain. The part of you that understands physics and mechanics is at war with what your eyes are telling you. This exact moment is something paranormal investigators call the point of no return. It's the instant an observer can no longer rationalize what they are seeing within the known framework of reality. There's a famous account from the early days of spirit photography, the 1860s case of William H. Mumler. He was a photographer who produced images that appeared to contain the ghostly apparitions of his sitter's deceased relatives. Skeptics explained it away as double exposure, a simple darkroom trick. But his supporters, people who desperately wanted to believe, described the moment they first saw a recognizable loved one's face in a photograph with him. It was a moment where they had to either accept the impossible or deny the evidence of their own senses. You're having a Mumler moment, right here on Cedar Lane. You can either believe your eyes or believe in the laws of motion. You can't do both. The truck continues its serene, impossible journey, but this time, something is different. As it passes your house, you hear a new sound, a sound you missed last night, buried beneath the music. A low, rhythmic creaking. You follow the sound with your eyes, looking towards the back of the truck. The large double doors of the freezer compartment are swinging. Not wildly, as if from the motion of the vehicle, but with a slow, deliberate pulse. Creak open, creak shut, open, shut. In perfect time with the most distorted, drawn-out notes of the song. As if the music itself is the mechanism, the force that is moving them. It's a mechanical heartbeat in time with the corrupted melody. A chilling local story comes to mind. One that's become something of an urban legend, told to scare teenagers away from the old quarry on the edge of town. The story goes that a group of kids were playing on the abandoned conveyor belts and machinery late one night. One of the teens, a notorious prankster, rigged one of the old rock-crushing machines to turn on for a few seconds. The sudden, deafening roar of the machine in the dead of night was so terrifying that one of the girls reportedly had a heart attack and died. The prankster was never charged, but the legend says that if you go out to the quarry on the anniversary of her death, you can still hear the rhythmic, metallic ka-thump of the machine turning itself on and off, a mechanical ghost forever replaying the moment that killed her. It's the idea of a machine retaining an echo of an event, an inanimate object cursed with a memory. You can't help but see a connection to the rhythmic, soulless creaking of the truck's back doors. The implications of the empty driver's seat are staggering. It changes everything. This isn't a prank. A human being would need to be in control. This is something else entirely. It's an automaton, a phenomenon with its own agency, its own schedule, its own purpose. The truck is not just a vehicle. It is the entity itself. The metal, the wheels, the faded paint, the broken music box, they are all part of one malevolent, moving object. So, the new burning question is no longer who is driving the truck, but what is driving it. Is it a force, a memory, a will? What kind of energy can propel a 2-ton vehicle down a street, play a specific song at a specific time, and open and close its doors in a mocking rhythmic pulse? Is it an echo of a long-dead driver, forced to repeat his route for eternity? Or is the truck itself the ghost, a mechanical specter forever bound to the streets of a summer that never ended? The impossible is no longer a theory. It's rolling past your window. The third night, you don't watch alone. The impossible sight of the driverless truck has shattered your ability to keep this to yourself. You need a witness. You need someone else to see it, to validate that you are not losing your mind. You spend the day in a haze of anxiety, culminating in a hushed, frantic phone call to your neighbor Mark, the one who lives directly across the street. You feel foolish as you tell him. You stumble over the words, trying to make a ghost ice cream truck sound like a sane thing for a grown adult to say. He's skeptical, of course. His tone is placating, the kind you'd use on a child describing a monster in the closet. But there must be a tremor of genuine fear in your voice, a desperate sincerity that convinces him. Or maybe it's just that he's a good neighbor. He agrees, with a heavy sigh, to stay up and watch with you. I'll look out my window, you look out yours, he says. We'll see what's what. So, as 3 a.m. approaches, you're back at your window. But this time it feels different. There's a strange sense of solidarity. You look across the dark street to Mark's house. You can't see him, but you know he's there, waiting behind his own blinds. The presence of another observer makes the world feel slightly more solid, less dreamlike. Maybe his rational gaze will exorcise the phantom. Maybe with 2 sets of eyes on it, the illusion will break. 2:59. The street is a study in suburban stillness. A cat darts across a lawn and disappears into a hedge. The air is cool and heavy with dew. The clock on your nightstand is no longer just a timepiece. It's a starting pistol. 3 a.m. The music begins. That same soul-sick tune. A sour note in the symphony of the night. You feel a knot of vindication tighten in your chest. It's real. Mark has to be hearing this. You look across the street, expecting to see a light flicker on, some sign of his alarm. But his house remains dark, inert. The truck appears at the end of the lane, its headlights cutting their weak path. It begins its slow, inexorable crawl. You watch it, your eyes glued once more to the empty driver's seat. It is as vacant and impossible as it was the night before. The warped music swells, seeming to press in on your windows. The sound so clear, so present, it feels like you could reach out and touch it. The truck passes. The rhythmic creaking of the back doors begins its mocking pulse. The whole impossible procession unfolds right in front of you, a private parade of dread. It reaches the end of the street, and the music fades away, leaving the profound, ringing silence in its wake. You grab your phone, your fingers fumbling with the screen. You call Mark. It rings 3 times before he picks up, his voice thick with sleep. Hello? Did you see it? Did you hear it? You ask, your voice a harsh whisper. There's a pause. See what? He mumbles. I looked, watched until almost 3:10. Nothing. Not a thing. Street was dead quiet. You sure you weren't dreaming, man? His words hit you like a physical blow. You stare out the window at the empty, silent street where a 2-ton phantom just drove past, blaring its broken song. How could he not have heard it? His house is right there. The sound was deafening. How could he not have seen it? The headlights, the hulking shape of it. It's impossible. You stammer something about being sure, about how it was right there. He sighs again, the sound crackling over the phone. Look, maybe you're just stressed. Get some sleep. We'll talk tomorrow. He hangs up. You're left alone in your room, the silence now feeling accusatory. The solidarity you felt has evaporated, replaced by a chilling, terrifying isolation. This is no longer just a haunting, it's a targeted one. The phenomenon is choosing its audience. This realization is, in some ways, more frightening than the truck itself. It implies an intelligence, a selectivity. The street is now fractured, divided into two camps, those who experience the nightly visitation and those who sleep through it, completely oblivious. This selective manifestation is a recurring and deeply unsettling theme in paranormal accounts. Take, for example, the famous case of the Bell Witch haunting in 19th century Tennessee, which plagued the family of John Bell. The entity was said to pinch, slap, and speak to certain family members, primarily the daughter Betsy and John himself. Yet, visitors to the house, even those staying overnight in the same room, would often experience nothing at all. The phenomena seemed tailored to its victims, performing only for a chosen few. Skeptics use this as proof of a hoax, arguing that if it were real, everyone would experience it. But for those who believe, it suggests something far more sinister, a haunting that is personal, a tormentor that knows its target. What is the criteria for being chosen on Cedar Lane? Why you? Why not Mark? The day after, the cracks in the neighborhood begin to show. You cautiously bring it up with another neighbor, Mrs. Gable, a sweet elderly woman who spends her days gardening. When you ask if she's heard anything strange at night, her face clouds over. She admits, in a hushed tone, that she's been hearing a sad song late at night, but was too scared to look. She thought it was her mind playing tricks on her, a symptom of old age. 2 houses down, however, a young couple with a new baby laugh it off. They're up at all hours with the infant, they say, and they've never heard a thing besides the usual suburban noises. The street is no longer a unified community. It's a patchwork of believers and non-believers, of the haunted and the blissfully ignorant. A quiet paranoia begins to set in. You start to look at your neighbors differently. When you see them in the morning fetching their newspapers, you wonder, did you hear it too? Are you one of us? Or are you one of them? The division creates a subtle, unspoken tension. It's the loneliness of the person who has seen the ghost. You are now the keeper of a terrible secret, a truth that others, living mere feet away from you, are incapable of perceiving. And this leads to a new, deeply disturbing question. Which is the true reality? Is the haunting real, and some people are simply deaf and blind to its frequency? Or is the quiet, peaceful street the real Cedar Lane, and you and a few others like Mrs. Gabler are the ones experiencing a shared delusion, a folie à deux spread across multiple houses? What if the phantom truck isn't a ghost haunting the street, but a sickness haunting your mind? You've accepted the impossible. You've accepted the isolation. You are one of the chosen few who bear witness to the nightly procession. Your goal is no longer to prove its existence to others, but to understand what you are seeing. The fear is still there, a cold stone in your gut, but it's now mingled with a grim, obsessive curiosity. The 4th night, you ignore the empty driver's seat. You ignore the impossible physics of its movement. Your focus is drawn to the back of the truck, to the rhythmically swinging doors and the darkness they reveal. As the truck makes its slow pass, you watch those doors. Creak open, creak shut. It's not a wide swing, only a foot or two, but it's enough. Each time they part, you try to peer inside. You're expecting to see something. The glint of stainless steel freezers, boxes of ice pops, the mundane interior of an ice cream truck. But you see none of that. What you see is nothing. And when I say nothing, I don't mean it's just dark inside. This is a different quality of darkness. It's not the simple absence of light. It's an active, aggressive, and absolute blackness. The streetlights of Cedar Lane cast a pale orange glow on everything: the road, the lawns, the side of the truck itself. Logically, some of that ambient light should spill into the truck's interior when the doors swing open. It should illuminate a back wall, a floor, a corner, but it doesn't. The light seems to stop at the threshold of the doors, as if hitting a solid wall of black. It doesn't reflect. It doesn't penetrate. It is consumed. It's a patch of night sky without stars, a hole cut out of the fabric of the world. You press your face closer to the cool glass of your window, squinting, trying to force your eyes to adjust, to find some detail in that void. There is none. No shape, no form, no texture. It is a perfect, featureless, two-dimensional black square that appears for a second, then vanishes as the doors creak shut. This darkness feels ancient and profound. It feels like a fundamental wrongness, a violation of the laws of optics. It's a darkness that has a presence, a weight. You can almost feel its coldness from across the street. It's the kind of darkness you feel you could fall into forever. This concept of a light-devouring darkness is something that appears in very specific, very strange folklore. It's not the typical darkness of a cave or a moonless night. It's something more. There's a documented historical account from a 17th century manuscript detailing the exorcism of a possessed barn in rural France. The priest, Father Sebastian Michaelis, wrote in his journal that when the demon was commanded to show a sign of its presence, it didn't manifest as a shape or a sound, but as a patch of devouring gloom in the corner of the hayloft. He described it as a place where the light from his lantern didst seem to perish upon its edge, and that to look upon it was to feel a profound sense of despair and the absolute absence of God. He called it not an absence of light, but a presence of shadow. This is what you're seeing in the back of the ice cream truck. A presence of shadow. A hungry void. The following day, you feel compelled to act. The image of that absolute blackness is seared into your mind. You need to know more. You recall a detail from a brief conversation with your neighbor, Mark, before he dismissed your story. He'd mentioned that the house on the corner, number 313, had been vacant for years. It was owned by a bank, stuck in some kind of legal limbo. He said kids in the neighborhood used to dare each other to go up on the porch, that the place just had a bad feeling about it. You find yourself standing on the sidewalk, staring at it. It's the house the truck passes first on its route. It's a modest, single-story home, but the neglect is obvious. The paint is peeling, the lawn is a riot of weeds, and the windows are dark and vacant, like eyes that have been clouded over. There's a local story, a piece of neighborhood gossip really, attached to that house. A family lived there in the early 2000s. They were, by all accounts, perfectly normal. A mother, a father, and a young son. But they left abruptly. The story goes that the mother became convinced there was a dark spot in their son's closet. She claimed it was a patch of shadow that didn't belong, a spot that was darker than the rest of the unlit closet, and that it was growing. She emptied the closet, painted it white, installed a bright light, but she claimed the spot remained, a stubborn stain of pure black. Her husband thought she was suffering from postpartum depression or psychosis. They moved away suddenly, abandoning much of their furniture, after she became hysterical one night, screaming that the spot was breathing. The story is always told with a laugh, a cautionary tale about stress and new parenthood. But standing here, after what you've seen, it doesn't sound funny at all. It sounds like she saw the same thing you did. The truck, the music, the empty seat, they are all terrifying. But this darkness is something else. It feels like the source. The other elements are the lure, the performance. But the darkness is the entity itself. The truck isn't just a haunted vehicle. It's a container, a transport. It's a mobile display case for a piece of the void. It's bringing this patch of consuming absolute night on a tour of your street, opening its doors to offer a glimpse of the abyss. And this raises the most chilling question yet. A question that burrows deep into your soul as you stare at the peeling paint of the abandoned house. What is the nature of this darkness? Is it merely a place where light cannot go? A simple supernatural anomaly? Or is it an aperture? A doorway? When those doors swing open, are you just looking at the unlit interior of a truck? Or are you looking through the world into somewhere else entirely? A place with no light, no matter, no hope. A place of pure, final, and eternal emptiness. And what happens if you look for too long? The impossible blackness in the back of the truck becomes the new focal point of your obsession. It has shifted the mystery from a ghostly replay to something far more elemental and sinister. It feels ancient, and you find yourself wondering how long it has been tied to this specific patch of land. This street, your research, driven by a gnawing need for answers, moves away from paranormal theory and into local history. You spend hours scrolling through digitized town archives, newspaper records, and local history forums, typing in keywords Cedar Lane, child disappearance, strange events, summer tragedy. And then, buried in a poorly scanned local newspaper from August of 1978, you find it. A small article, a human interest piece that became a tragedy. The headline reads, "Search continues for missing boy." The boy's name was David. He was 8 years old. He lived in one of the first houses built on Cedar Lane, back when the rest of the street was still mostly undeveloped lots and lingering construction equipment. The article paints a picture of a quintessential summer evening. The sky was hazy, the air thick with the smell of cut grass, and the sound of cicadas. An ice cream truck had made its way down the newly paved street, its cheerful jingle a novelty in the new subdivision. David, like all the other kids, had begged his mother for $1 and run outside, chasing the sound. He was last seen by a neighbor, standing on the curb, waiting for the truck to stop. But here is where the official story gets strange. The ice cream man, a local vendor who had served the town for years, was questioned by police. He was adamant, and his sales logs backed him up, that he had never driven down Cedar Lane that night. His route ended 2 streets over. He had packed up and gone home well before dusk. The neighbors who heard the jingle were dismissed as having misheard a radio or another car, but David's parents and several other residents swore they heard it. A faint, happy tune that drew their children outside. David was the only one who didn't come back. The search lasted for weeks. Volunteers combed the nearby woods and the remaining construction sites. Police dragged the local ponds. No trace of him was ever found. No clothing, no footprints, no witnesses to an abduction. He simply vanished from the face of the earth between his front door and the curb. The article ends on a note of fading hope, with a quote from David's heartbroken mother. "It's like the music called him, and he just followed it away." This historical account changes the entire context of the phantom truck. It's no longer a random, terrifying anomaly. It now has an anchor point, an original sin. The entity you see tonight is an echo, a malignant reenactment of that evening in the summer of '78. The cheerful jingle the residents heard back then has, over the decades, decayed and warped into the sour, broken melody you hear now. The joy and innocence of that original event has festered into the dread and wrongness of its nightly replay. You dig deeper, looking for more personal accounts. You find a post on an old, defunct local blog from a woman who claimed to be David's older sister. She was a teenager at the time, and her account was filled with a lifetime of guilt and chilling detail. She wrote that for years after he vanished, her mother would wake up in the middle of the night, claiming she could hear the ice cream truck. Not a scary, distorted version, but the same faint, happy tune from that evening. She would go and stand on the front porch, sometimes for hours, just listening to a sound no one else could hear, waiting for it to bring her son back. The sister wrote that the saddest part was that sometimes, on the nights her mother claimed the music was loudest, the family dog would stand at the door and whine, its eyes fixed on the empty street, as if it could hear it too. This story of a spectral sound tied to a tragedy is not unique. It recalls the eerie legend of the M train, a ghost train said to run on a decommissioned railway line in Silverton, Colorado. The legend is tied to a real historical event, a devastating avalanche in 1906 that wiped out a train and killed most of its crew and passengers. For decades afterwards, people living near the old tracks reported hearing a phantom train whistle and the rumble of wheels on nights when the weather was particularly bad. They described it not as a frightening sound, but a deeply sorrowful one, the sound of a journey that was never completed, forever trying to reach its destination. The phantom ice cream truck feels similar. It's a journey that never ended, a transaction that was never completed. David went to the curb, but the truck never stopped for him more. Perhaps it did. The disappearance of David in '78 cast the darkness in the back of the truck in a new, even more horrifying light. Before, it was an abstract cosmic horror hole in the world. Now, It's a destination. It's the answer to the unanswerable question of where David went. He wasn't taken to the woods or driven to another town. He was taken into the darkness. The void you see is not just an absence of light. It's a place that the truck opens up night after night. He followed the music, just as his mother said, and stepped off the curb and into that perfect, featureless, all-consuming black. The question that now haunts you is one of purpose. Why does it keep coming back? Why reenact this tragedy every single night? Is it a mindless echo, a scar on time, forever replaying the moment of its creation, like the ghost train of Silverton? Or is it something worse? Is it relishing its victory? Is it a predator that returns to the scene of a successful hunt, parading its trophy, that piece of absolute void where a little boy used to be? Or, and this is the thought that truly makes your blood run cold, has it simply gotten hungry again? Is the music a lure? And is it driving the streets once more, looking for someone new to follow its song? The name of the boy, David, and the tragedy of 1978 have given the faceless horror a name and a history. But it's also created more questions. Who was the actual ice cream man back then? The one the police cleared. The one who insisted he was never on Cedar Lane that night. The old newspaper article didn't name him, simply referring to him as a local vendor. It takes another deep dive into the town's digital archives, this time cross-referencing business licenses from the 1970s with the police report summaries you managed to find. And there, in a faded scan of a town business ledger from 1978, you find him. His name was Arthur Finley, but his business name, painted on the side of his truck, was Mr. Smiley's Sweet Treats. The irony is sickening. Mr. Smiley. You find a few more mentions of him. He was a local fixture for decades, starting his route in the post-war boom of the 1950s. Early mentions are glowing. He was known for his kindness, for giving free ice cream to kids who couldn't afford it, for having the cleanest truck and the cheeriest jingle in the county. He was a beloved part of a generation's childhood. But as you trace his presence through the years, the tone of the mentions begins to shift subtly. By the mid-70s, the descriptions are less glowing. He was getting older, more forgetful. A letter to the editor in the local paper from 1977 complains about his truck looking run down and the music being a bit tinny and sad. He was no longer the cheerful icon. He was becoming a relic, a slightly sorrowful figure clinging to a bygone era. After the tragedy of David's disappearance in '78, even though he was officially cleared of any involvement, his business collapsed. The cloud of association, however unfair, was too much. Parents were wary. The joy was gone. Mr. Smiley's Sweet Treats went out of business less than a year later. Arthur Finley, Mr. Smiley himself, passed away a few years after that, in the early '80s. Reportedly a lonely and broken man. The key to the mystery, you feel, might lie in those final years of his service. You start searching online forums again, but this time you're looking for anecdotes, for memories of Mr. Smiley from the late '70s. You find a post in a Nostalgia for Our Town Facebook group. A woman, now in her late 50s, shares a long, rambling memory of her childhood summers. Buried in the middle of it is a paragraph about Mr. Smiley. It's the unsettling personal anecdote you were looking for. She writes, "I remember Mr. Smiley's truck near the end. It was still a treat, but it started to feel a little creepy. I must have been about 10 or 11, so maybe 77 or 78. I remember one time, he stopped on our street, and the music was playing, but it sounded weird, like the batteries were dying. It was so slow and drawn out. We all ran up to the truck, and he was just sitting in the driver's seat, staring straight ahead. He wasn't even looking at us. His hands were on the wheel, but he had this blank, empty look on his face. We were all yelling our orders at him, and it was like he couldn't hear us. He just sat there for what felt like forever, with that awful, slow music playing. Then, just as suddenly, he sort of woke up, blinked a few times, and smiled at us. But the smile didn't reach his eyes. It was like he was a puppet, and someone had just started pulling the strings again. He served us our ice cream and drove off, but we all just kind of stood there. It was weird. My friend Jenny said he looked like the lights were on, but nobody was home. That description, the lights were on, but nobody was home, sends a shiver down your spine. It's a chillingly familiar image. The empty gaze, the delayed reaction, the sense of an absence in the driver's seat, even when the man was physically present. It's as if the entity, the phenomenon, the darkness, was already beginning to manifest. It hadn't taken over the truck yet, but it was starting to seep in, to wear Arthur Finley's face like a mask, to practice sitting in his seat. He wasn't the monster. He was its first victim. The entity was learning the route, learning the music, learning the role it would need to play. The slow, dying music box, the woman described it, was the precursor to the deliberately distorted melody you hear every night. This connects to a very specific type of haunting narrative, one that is less about ghosts and more about parasitic entities. There are documented accounts, particularly in older European folklore, of spirits or entities that don't just haunt a place, but slowly hollow out a person. The 16th century demonologist Peter Binsfeld wrote of a type of demonic influence that didn't result in dramatic possession, but in a gradual emptying of the soul, where the person would continue their daily routines, but their personality, their will, their very essence, would be slowly consumed and replaced. Their bodies would become little more than fleshy automatons, operated by the entity within. Friends and family would simply note that the person had become distant, cold, and empty. Was this what was happening to Arthur Finley in his final years? Was he being hollowed out by the same void that now resides in the back of the phantom truck? His tarnished legacy is the saddest part of the story. He was a good man who brought joy to thousands of children, but his memory is now inextricably linked to a tragedy he had nothing to do with, and a horror that may have used him as its vessel. He wasn't just a witness, he was the point of entry. The entity latched onto him, his truck, his music, and used his familiar, trusted presence as camouflage. It co-opted his identity, wore his Mr. Smiley brand, and turned his cheerful jingle into a siren song to lure a child into the void. And when it was done with Arthur Finley, when his business was ruined and his spirit was broken, it discarded him. It kept the truck, it kept the music, and it kept the route. This new information leaves you with a haunting, philosophical question about the nature of evil. Does a predatory supernatural entity create its own lure from scratch? Or is it more efficient, more insidious, to simply find something that people already love and trust, and slowly corrupt it from the inside out? It's the ultimate violation, to take a symbol of innocence and joy, like a beloved neighborhood ice cream man, and twist it into a tool for an unspeakable purpose. It makes the nightly visitation not just terrifying, but a profound act of desecration. The consistency is what starts to get to you. Every single night, without fail. Not 2:59, not 3:01. The first notes of that corrupted jingle arrive at the precise moment the clock ticks over to 3 a.m. This isn't the approximate timing of a human habit or a faulty machine. This is a level of punctuality that is deeply unnatural. It's an appointment, and it's an appointment with the most supernaturally charged hour of the night. 3 o'clock in the morning. For centuries, this specific time has been steeped in folklore and religious tradition, earning it the ominous moniker of the witching hour, or more pointedly, the devil's hour. The term itself is believed to have originated in the 16th century, during the height of the European witch hunts. The church declared that this was the time when the veil between the living world and the spirit world was at its absolute thinnest. It was believed to be the hour when witches, demons, and other malevolent spirits could move most freely among mortals, their power at its peak. The theological reasoning behind it is a study in symbolic opposition. The canonical hours of prayer mark the day for monks and the devout, with the hour of Christ's death traditionally held to be 3 p.m. The devil's hour, at 3 a.m., was seen as a deliberate, mocking inversion of this holy moment. It was a time when demonic forces were said to perform their own dark sacraments, a mockery of the divine. It was the hour of Christ's greatest vulnerability on the cross, twisted into the hour of the supernatural's greatest strength. The phantom truck isn't just showing up late, it's arriving with a punctuality that is, in itself, a declaration. It's announcing its allegiance. It's operating on a schedule dictated by ancient, dark tradition. You start to think about the significance of this timing beyond just folklore. In modern times, 3 a.m. holds a different, but equally potent power. It's the hour of our deepest sleep, the time when our bodies are flooded with melatonin and our brains are in the depths of REM cycles. Our rational minds are at their weakest, our bodies at their most vulnerable. It's also the hour of profound silence in the modern world. The traffic has stopped, the televisions are off, the machinery of daily life has ground to a halt. It's a moment of societal stillness. For a phenomenon that wants to be heard, that wants to command the silence, there could be no better time. It doesn't have to compete with any other sounds. It owns the audio landscape of the night. There's a chillingly relevant account from a paranormal investigation team that studied a famously haunted hospital in Kentucky. They noticed that the reported apparitions, disembodied voices, and poltergeist activity spiked dramatically between 3 o'clock and 4 a.m. One of the lead investigators, a man with a background in environmental science, proposed a non-supernatural theory. He argued that this was the time when the city's power grid was at its lowest load, causing subtle fluctuations in the electromagnetic fields within the old hospital's wiring. He believed these EMF spikes were what caused hallucinations and feelings of dread. But his own partner, a lifelong sensitive, offered a different take. She said, "The energy of the world dies down, and the other things get their turn to be loud. Whether you believe in EMF spikes or spirits getting their turn, the result is the same. 3:00 a.m. is a time of unique power and vulnerability." You think about this in the context of Cedar Lane. The truck is exploiting this witching hour perfectly. It arrives when defenses, both psychological and spiritual, are at their lowest. The residents are asleep, susceptible. The world is quiet, offering it a perfect stage. The choice of 3 a.m. is not random. It is strategic. It's a display of intelligence, a calculated decision to maximize its psychological and possibly supernatural impact. There's a strange, almost forgotten local legend that seems to tie into this. It's a piece of old farming folklore from before the town was even a town. The story goes that if a farmer had a sick animal, one that was expected to die during the night, they would never check on it during the 3rd hour after midnight. They believed that if an animal died during that specific hour, its spirit wouldn't be able to pass on peacefully. Instead, a collector of sorrows, a spectral entity that roamed the empty fields during that time, would snatch the breath of the dying creature, trapping its spirit and adding its suffering to the entity's own essence. It was considered a mercy to let the animal die alone, rather than risk its soul by bearing witness during that specific cursed hour. Hearing this story now gives you a cold feeling. The truck arrives at 3 a.m. It plays its sorrowful, broken song. It carries a void of absolute blackness. Is it the collector of sorrows from the old legend, updated for the suburbs? Has it traded the open fields for paved streets? Instead of collecting the last breaths of dying animals, does it now seek out the lingering sorrow of a human tragedy, the echo of a lost boy? It arrives at the appointed hour to feed on the street's psychic wound, the sadness left behind by David's disappearance. The punctuality isn't just symbolic, it's functional. It's the time the veil is thin enough for it to cross over. It's the time its pre-memory, sorrow, fear is most accessible. This understanding of the truck's timing deepens the horror. It's not just a ghost. A typical haunting is often chaotic, its manifestations sporadic and unpredictable. This is different. This has discipline. This has a schedule. This is a ritual. The unwavering 3 a.m. arrival transforms the event from a mere haunting into a nightly malevolent ceremony. And it forces you to ask a terrifying fundamental question: if this entity is so old, so powerful, and so intelligent that it adheres to these ancient dark timetables, then what is the true scale of its nature? Are you merely dealing with the ghost of a single tragedy, or have you and your quiet suburban street inadvertently stumbled into the path of something far older and far more deliberate. The feeling of helpless observation becomes unbearable. You and the other chosen residents of Cedar Lane can no longer just stand by and be passive victims of this nightly ritual. A quiet, desperate coalition forms. It's you, the elderly Mrs. Gable from down the street, and a young man named Kevin who lives 2 houses over and who finally admitted to his wife that he'd been hearing the creepy music box for weeks. The three of you meet in your kitchen, the daylight feeling like a flimsy shield against the knowledge of what the night will bring. You decide you have to do something. You have to interfere. The first plan is the most logical, the most grounded in the 21st century. To document it, Kevin, being the most tech-savvy, sets up a high-definition video camera on a tripod in his upstairs window, aimed directly at the street. You do the same with your phone, making sure it's plugged in and recording. Mrs. Gable, bless her heart, says she'll just watch carefully and write down everything she sees. The goal is simple. Get irrefutable proof. Something you can show to the police, to the media, to someone, anyone, who might be able to offer a rational explanation or, failing that, believe you. As 3 a.m. approaches, there's a new tension in the air. It's not just fear. It's the anxiety of a planned confrontation. You watch the red recording light on your phone blink steadily. You know Kevin's camera is rolling across the street. This time, you think, we have it. The music starts. Right on cue. The truck appears. It glides down the street, driverless and impossible. The doors swing open, revealing the hungry void. It passes, and the music fades. The entire eerie spectacle unfolds as it always does. But as it happens, a strange sense of confidence builds in you. You recorded it. It's captured. The fight has begun. As soon as the silence returns, you grab your phone. Your hands are trembling slightly as you stop the recording and open the video file. You press play. The video is perfect. The empty street, the streetlights glow, the gentle rustle of leaves. You see the timestamp in the corner of the screen tick past 3 a.m. And then, nothing. The video continues, perfectly clear. For the entire 10-minute duration, the street remains empty. There is no truck. There are no headlights. More unnerving, there is no sound. You rewind and turn the volume all the way up. You hear the faint hum of the wind, but the loud, distorted jingle that filled your room just moments ago is completely absent from the recording. It's as if the event happened in a pocket of reality that your phone was incapable of perceiving. A text from Kevin comes in. My camera got nothing. FCC. Did you? You reply with a single word. Number. The failure is profoundly demoralizing. It's one thing for a phenomenon to be unbelievable. It's another for it to be actively, intelligently elusive. The next night, you escalate. The plan is to create a physical barrier. Kevin and you agree to move your heavy recycling and trash bins into the middle of the street right at 2:55 a.m. It's not a roadblock, but it's an obstacle. Something the truck will have to either stop for or hit. You want to force an interaction to break its serene, implacable glide. At 2:55 a.m., you and Kevin sneak out of your houses, your hearts pounding. The air is cold. You roll your large plastic bins into the center of the asphalt, placing them directly in the truck's established path. You then retreat to your respective homes, your windows, your observation posts. You feel a surge of adrenaline. This is it. Something has to give. 3 a.m. The music starts. The headlights appear. The truck begins its slow crawl towards the barricade of bins. You hold your breath, your knuckles white on the windowsill. The truck gets closer and closer. It doesn't slow down. It doesn't swerve. It is on a collision course. And then, something happens that your mind can barely process. As the front bumper of the truck gets to within inches of the first bin, the truck itself begins to flicker, like a bad television signal or a hologram that's losing power. For a split second, you can see the street through the truck. The image of the bins is visible through its ghostly, translucent form. It doesn't collide with the bins. It passes through them. There is no sound of impact, no plastic crunching, no scattering of trash. The bins don't even wobble. The truck solidifies on the other side and continues its journey down the street as if nothing was ever in its way. You are left staring at the utterly mundane, unmoved trash bin sitting in the middle of your street, stark proof of your complete and utter powerlessness. This incident brings to mind a documented piece of paranormal lore known as the phasing ghost. There are numerous historical accounts, like the famous Brown Lady of Rainham Hall in England, where witnesses claimed the apparition would descend a staircase and walk directly through solid object sand, even people who were in her path. This ability to become intangible is a hallmark of high-level paranormal entities, a demonstration that they are not bound by the physical laws that govern our world. They don't just inhabit our reality, they can selectively edit their interaction with it. A deeply unsettling local anecdote surfaces in the aftermath of your failed attempts. Mrs. Gable, shaken by the truck's phasing, tells you a story her grandfather used to tell about a man who lived on the outskirts of town in the 1920s. The man became convinced that a malevolent spirit, a shadow man, was entering his house every night through a specific window. He tried everything to stop it. He nailed the window shut, he bricked it up, he even tore down that entire section of the wall and rebuilt it without a window. But that night, he woke up to see the shadow man standing in his room, having simply passed through the new, solid wall. The man, according to the legend, went mad with the realization that his locks, his walls, his physical world, meant nothing to his tormentor. He was institutionalized, his last recorded words being, "You can't keep the water out with a net." You feel that same despair now. You tried to capture it with technology, and it refused to be seen. You tried to block it with physical matter, and it reminded you that matter is no obstacle. Every attempt to interfere, to exert some measure of control, has resulted in a more profound demonstration of its power. It's like punching a ghost. Your efforts don't just fail, they serve to highlight your own fragility and the complete dominance of the entity. The question that now plagues you is one of intent. Why did it refuse to be recorded? Why did it phase through the bins? Was it a conscious act of evasion? Or is its very nature so alien that it simply doesn't exist on a plane that our cameras can capture or our physical objects can touch? Is it deliberately toying with you, showing you how futile your resistance is? Or are you like an ant trying to build a dam in the path of a sunbeam? Your actions are so fundamentally incompatible with the nature of the phenomenon that they are simply irrelevant. The futility is the true terror. You are not in a fight. You are in a cage, and the monster is just outside, looking in, completely indifferent to the rattling of the bars. The failure of your physical and technological interventions pushes you into a state of resigned dread. The truck is untouchable. It is unprovable. The camera's blank recording is, in its own way, more terrifying than a blurry, ambiguous image would have been. A blurry image suggests something that is merely difficult to see. The blank recording suggests something that has the power to retroactively erase its own presence, to edit the very record of its existence. The phenomenon is not just elusive, it is aggressively anti-documentary. It guards its own mystery. This leads you down a new rabbit hole of research, one that feels both modern and ancient. You start looking into paranormal cases where technology inexplicably fails. The stories are everywhere, a staple of ghost hunting lore. Investigators report brand new batteries draining in an instant, fully charged cameras shutting down without reason, audio recorders capturing nothing but static in rooms filled with disembodied whispers. The phenomenon is often referred to as the ghost in the machine, a phrase originally coined by philosopher Gilbert Ryle to describe the mind-body dualism, but co-opted by paranormal enthusiasts to describe the apparent ability of supernatural entities to influence and manipulate electronic devices. You learn about the electronic voice phenomenon, or EVP, where voices are supposedly captured on recordings that were not audible to the human ear at the time. But you also learn about the flip side, the electronic silence phenomenon, a far less common but more disturbing occurrence, where loud, obvious sounds are conspicuously absent from a recording. A documented case from an investigation of the abandoned Waverly Hills Sanatorium details a team of ghost hunters who were all present when a heavy metal door at the end of a long corridor slammed shut with a deafening bang. Multiple audio and video recorders were running. When they reviewed the footage, the door is seen to slam, but the event is completely silent on every single device. The sound, the very vibration of the air, was selectively erased from the record. This is what happened to you. This is what happened to Kevin. The truck is a walking, rolling zone of electronic silence. It projects an aura that our technology is simply blind and deaf to. It's a ghost that has learned to evade the very tools we created to pin ghosts down. It exists only in the most fallible, most easily dismissed recording device of all, human memory. And it seems to prefer it that way. The local history of Cedar Lane offers a strange, low-tech precursor to this. You speak with Mrs. Gable again, digging for more of her grandfather's stories. She tells you about the old farmlands before the development. Apparently, there was a specific patch of woods, right where your section of the street now sits, that had a bizarre reputation. People who tried to take photographs in those woods found their pictures would never develop properly. This was back in the age of film photography, in the 40s and 50s. The photos would come back from the developer as a milky, fogged-over mess, or with strange, unexplainable light streaks obscuring the image. The local camera club even declared the area a dead zone for photography, blaming it on some unknown mineral deposit or natural radiation that interfered with the silver halide crystals in the film. But the old-timers had a different explanation. They said the woods didn't like having its picture taken. They believed a spirit, a genius loci, resided there that was fundamentally camera-shy and would actively spoil any attempt to capture its likeness. Hearing this story now, it feels less like a quaint piece of folklore and more like a crucial piece of the puzzle. The entity that haunts Cedar Lane has always been here. It has always resisted being documented. It has simply updated its methods. In the 1950s, it fogged film. In the 21st century, it corrupts digital files and erases audio tracks. It has adapted its defenses to match our technology, maintaining its shroud of plausible deniability. The failed recordings are not a glitch. They are a feature of the haunting, a core component of its strategy. It wants to be seen by the naked eye, heard by the naked ear, but only as a fleeting, personal experience that can be easily dismissed as a dream, a delusion, or a lie. It thrives in the space between certainty and doubt. The psychological impact of this is profound. Without proof, you are trapped. You can't convince the skeptical neighbors. You can't go to the authorities. Who would you even call? The police? Hello. There's an ice cream truck that passes my house every night, but you can't see it on camera, and it can drive through solid objects. You'd be met with silence. Or worse, a recommendation for a psychiatric evaluation. The entity's ability to evade documentation is the masterstroke of its torment. It isolates you, making your terrifying reality an island that no one else can visit. It forces you to question your own sanity, because without external validation, the mind can become its own worst enemy. This leads to the ultimate, unnerving question about the relationship between consciousness and reality. What if the phenomenon isn't just erasing itself from our machines, but is, in fact, never really in our physical reality to begin with? What if the truck, the music, the void, are all a direct projection into the minds of the chosen few? A targeted psychic broadcast. Our eyes and ears perceive it as real, but it has no physical mass, no sound waves that a microphone can detect. It's a hallucination, but a shared one, beamed directly into the consciousness of those who are, for some reason, tuned to its frequency. Your phone didn't fail to record the truck. It performed perfectly. It recorded the physical reality of an empty street. The truck was never there for it to record. It was only ever in your head. This idea is, in some ways, the most terrifying of all. Because if the monster isn't just outside your window, but can get directly inside your mind, then there is no wall, no lock, no barrier that can ever truly keep you safe. The nightly visitations continue, their untouchable nature now a confirmed, soul-crushing fact. For you and Mrs. Gable, the horror has settled into a kind of grim, chronic condition. You brace for it, you endure it, and you feel the psychic exhaustion in the morning. But for Kevin, the young man from two houses down, something begins to change. His involvement wasn't just about validation. It was a challenge. And the entity's effortless rebuttal of his cameras and his barricade seems to have broken something inside him. He is no longer just a frightened witness. He is becoming a man obsessed. It starts subtly. His lights are on later and later into the night, long after the truck has passed. You see him through his window, sometimes just sitting there, staring out at the empty street. During the day, he's no longer the friendly, wave from the driveway neighbor. His face is pale, his eyes are ringed with dark circles, and he has a new, hunted look about him. He stops going to work. His wife, who still can't see or hear the phenomenon, grows more and more distressed. She confides in you one afternoon, her voice trembling, that he's papered his office windows with printouts from the internet pages about demonology, portal theory, spectral mechanics. He's bought old, obscure books on folklore and paranormal investigation. He's not just researching the entity, he's preparing for war. His obsession is a deep dive into the abyss. He starts leaving things on his lawn offerings, or perhaps warnings. One night, it's a circle of salt on the grass. The next, it's a line of iron filings across his driveway. He tells you, in a frantic, hushed conversation over the fence, that he read iron is supposed to repel ghostly entities. The truck, of course, glides over the iron filings as if they were dust, its ghostly form undisturbed. Each failure doesn't deter him. It just makes him more desperate, more frantic. He is a man in a feedback loop of terror and obsession. The entity has become the central organizing principle of his life. Everything else his job, his marriage, his health is secondary. This kind of psychological collapse in the face of the supernatural is a tragically common theme. There is a well-documented psychological profile of individuals who become fixated on a paranormal experience. It often mirrors the stages of grief, but in a twisted form. Denial, then anger, then a desperate, all-consuming bargaining phase where they try to control the uncontrollable, and finally, a descent into a state of chronic, paranoid anxiety. A famous historical case is that of Herbert P., a respected London barrister in the late 19th century, who became convinced his house was haunted by a knocking spirit. His initial interest was academic, but it quickly spiraled. He abandoned his legal practice, spent his fortune on mediums and paranormal investigators, and alienated his family. His detailed journals, which survive to this day, are a harrowing account of a rational mind slowly being eroded by an obsession with the irrational. He died in poverty and isolation, his final entry reading, "The knocking is all I have left. It is the only thing that is real." You see the same tragic trajectory in Kevin. The truck is the only thing that is real to him now. His wife tells you he's started talking to it. When the music begins, he goes to his window and whispers at it, sometimes pleading, sometimes cursing. He's trying to communicate with it, to understand its motives, a one-way conversation with the abyss. He has lost the thread that separates the observer from the participant. The most disturbing development comes one afternoon. You see him in his garage, working on something. He's built a strange contraption. It looks like a series of copper pipes arranged in a parabolic dish, all wired to a car battery. It's a homemade EMF pump, a ghost-hunting device designed to flood an area with electromagnetic energy. His theory, he explains to you with a feverish glint in his eye, is that if he can't record the entity, maybe he can disrupt it. Maybe he can fry its circuits with a powerful enough blast of energy. His wife has been pleading with him to stop, but he sees it as his duty, his responsibility to fight back. That night, as 2:55 a.m. approaches, you see him drag the device out onto his front lawn. He hooks it up to the battery. He's wearing rubber gloves and safety goggles. He looks like a mad scientist preparing for his final, desperate experiment. As the first faint notes of the truck's jingle reach you, he throws a switch. The device hums to life with a low, buzzing sound. You can almost feel the static electricity in the air. The truck appears at the end of the street. It begins its crawl. Kevin stands on his lawn, a wild, triumphant look on his face, as the phantom vehicle enters the supposed kill zone of his machine. And, for a moment, it seems to work. The truck's form flickers violently, more intensely than it did with the trash bins. The music distorts even further, dissolving into a screech of pure static. But it doesn't vanish. Instead, the headlights of the truck, which were always a pale, sickly yellow, flare up with an intense, blinding white light. They focus directly on Kevin. The screeching static from the truck's music seems to coalesce, to focus into a single, piercing tone aimed right at him. Kevin drops to his knees, clutching his head, screaming in pain. The buzzing from his own machine dies as the car battery shorts out with a loud pop and a puff of smoke. The truck's headlights dim back to their usual yellow. The music returns to its familiar, broken melody. And the truck glides past, its nightly procession momentarily disturbed but ultimately completely unaffected. It's as if it just swatted a fly. Kevin is left kneeling on his lawn, sobbing, not from pain anymore, but from sheer, abject defeat. The incident is a terrifying turning point. The entity is not just passive or indifferent. It is capable of reacting. It can defend itself. It can inflict pain. Kevin's descent into madness wasn't just a result of his own obsession. It seems the entity itself gave him a final, brutal push. And it leaves you with a truly horrifying question about the nature of the haunting. Is the entity simply on a fixed, unchangeable loop, a mindless echo? Or is it aware of its audience? Did it see Kevin's defiance, his pathetic attempt to fight back, and decide to make an example of him? The possibility that the thing in the truck is watching you, judging your reactions, and capable of lashing out when provoked, changes the rules entirely. You are no longer just watching a scary movie. You are in it, and the monster knows you're there. Kevin's breakdown is a stark warning. His attempt to fight back only resulted in a terrifying display of the entity's power. He is a shell of his former self now, his obsession curdled into a permanent, vacant fear. His wife finally convinced him to get help, and they moved away within a month. Their house now sits empty, another dark window on a street that is slowly accumulating them. You and Mrs. Gable are the only two known witnesses left. And with Kevin gone, the entity's focus seems to narrow. The nightly procession feels more personal, more intimate. The music, you swear, sounds a little louder when it passes your house now. And it begins to change its tune. Not the melody itself that remains the same broken, agonizing rendition of "Pop Goes the Weasel," but something new is being woven into it. A faint, almost subliminal layer of sound. At first, you can't place it. It's a whisper, a trace, a sound hiding beneath the discordant notes. You find yourself straining to hear it, trying to isolate it from the main jingle. It takes several nights before you can identify it with any certainty. It's a child's voice. A single, soft, endlessly repeating word. It sounds like a name. David? The voice is not frightening in the way a scream would be. It's soft, melancholic, and deeply, chillingly familiar. It's the sound of the boy from the 1978 newspaper article. The entity is now using his name, his memory, as a new instrument in its dreadful orchestra. But the voice is not just a sound. It's a lure. It's a hook, baited with profound sadness and a specific, targeted nostalgia. The music is no longer just a terrifying announcement of its presence. It has become a call, a siren song. And it finds its target in the most vulnerable person left on the street, Mrs. Gable. She phones you one morning, her voice more frail and frightened than you've ever heard it. She tells you she hears it too, the little boy's voice. But for her, the effect is different. It doesn't just scare her, it breaks her heart. She's lived on Cedar Lane for 50 years. She remembers David. She remembers him as a bright, laughing child who used to chase butterflies in her garden. The sound of his name, whispered from the phantom truck, is a very personal kind of torture for her. It's dredging up a grief she thought was long buried. This phenomenon, of a spirit using a familiar, trusted voice as a lure, is one of the most insidious and well-documented tropes in paranormal lore. It appears in countless folk tales, from the Celtic legends of the Fae, who would mimic the cries of lost children to draw travelers off the path, to the Native American stories of skinwalkers who could perfectly replicate the voice of a loved one to trick their victims into opening the door. It's a tactic that bypasses our instinct for self-preservation by appealing to our compassion, our love, our grief. It weaponizes our own humanity against us. There's a particularly chilling historical account from the transcripts of the Salem witch trials. A young accuser, Mercy Lewis, testified that the spectral form of the accused, Martha Corey, would torment her at night. But it wasn't just a monstrous apparition. She claimed the specter would sometimes take on the voice of her own deceased mother, whispering to her, begging Mercy to come with her, promising to take her to a place with no more sorrow. The court saw this as proof of the devil's cunning, his ability to wear the mask of an angel to tempt a soul to its damnation. You fear this is what's happening to Mrs. Gable. The entity has found her weakness, her memory, her compassion for the lost boy. The whisper of David is a hook cast directly into her heart. She starts talking about him constantly. She tells you she feels she has to do something, that maybe the boy's spirit is trapped in the truck and is calling for help. You try to warn her, to tell her it's a trick, a trap, just like Kevin's EMF machine was a trap. But your rational warnings are no match for the powerful emotional pull of the siren song. One night, you are at your window, watching the truck begin its approach. The whisper of David seems clearer than ever tonight, a heartbreaking sigh carried on the cold night air. You look towards Mrs. Gable's house, and your blood runs cold. Her front door is open, and she is standing on her porch, a small, frail silhouette in her nightgown, bathed in the sickly orange glow of the streetlights. She is staring at the approaching truck, her posture not one of fear, but of mesmerized anticipation. She takes a step off her porch, then another. She is walking slowly, deliberately, towards the street, towards the curb, right where David was last seen standing in the summer of '78. The truck glides closer, its empty driver's seat a vacant throne, its back doors beginning their rhythmic, pulsing swing. The distorted music and the whispered name seem to be pulling her forward, an invisible string reeling her in. You want to scream, to run outside, to tackle her, and drag her back to safety. But you are frozen, paralyzed by a terror so profound it feels like a physical weight. You are witnessing the lure in action. The question that screams through your mind is one of agonizing urgency. What is the true purpose of this hypnotic call? Is it trying to collect another soul, to add Mrs. Gable to the void where David resides? Or is the purpose something even more twisted? Perhaps it doesn't want to take her. Perhaps it just wants to see her walk to the curb. Perhaps its true nourishment is not the soul itself, but the act of hope being summoned, manipulated, and then, ultimately, crushed. Is it a collector of souls, or is it a connoisseur of despair, savoring the moment a person, driven by compassion, walks willingly towards the darkness? You are frozen at your window, a helpless spectator to a scene of hypnotic horror. Mrs. Gable, frail and resolute, is walking toward the curb, her eyes fixed on the approaching phantom truck. The air is thick with the warped jingle and the insidious whisper of the lost boy's name. The truck's back doors are swinging open and shut, revealing that sliver of absolute, hungry darkness with each pulse. She is just a few feet from the edge of the road. This is it, the moment of culmination. The entity is about to claim another victim, right before your eyes. You finally break your paralysis. You lunge for your phone to call 911, though what you would say, you have no idea. Your fingers are fumbling on the screen, when suddenly, the world goes silent. Not a fade out, not a gradual receding of the sound. It's an abrupt, jarring cut. One moment, the air is vibrating with the dissonant melody. The next, there is a total and absolute absence of sound. It's as if someone hit a universal mute button. The silence is so sudden and so profound that it's more shocking than the music ever was. It rings in your ears, a deafening nothingness. You look up from your phone, back to the street. The truck is gone. It didn't drive away. It didn't fade out. It didn't flicker and vanish. It's simply not there anymore. It was there one instant, a massive, physical, light-blocking presence, and in the next, it's gone, leaving only the mundane reality of the empty street behind. Mrs. Gable is standing at the edge of her lawn, blinking, as if waking from a deep trance. She looks around, confused, her face a mask of bewilderment and profound disappointment. She shivers in the cold night air, wraps her arms around herself, and slowly, dejectedly, turns and walks back into her house, closing the door behind her. The next night, you wait. You, and you assume Mrs. Gable, wait for the familiar dread of 3 a.m., but it never comes. The clock on your nightstand clicks over to 3 o'clock, then 3:01, then 3:10. The street outside remains utterly, completely, blessedly, silent, and still. For the first time in what feels like an eternity, Cedar Lane sleeps peacefully through the witching hour. The truck does not come. The silence should be a relief. It should be a victory. The nightmare is over. But it isn't. The silence that follows is, in its own way, more terrifying than the nightly jingle ever was. The first night, the silence is fragile, tense. You keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the music to start late. It doesn't. The second night, the silence feels heavy, watchful. The absence of the truck is now a presence in itself. It's the feeling you get in a house you know is empty, but you still feel like you're being watched. The dread hasn't vanished. It is mutated. It's no longer a fear of what will happen at 3 a.m., but a gnawing, anxious uncertainty about why it stopped. This phenomenon, the terror of a haunting's sudden cessation, is a strange and lesser-known aspect of paranormal encounters. We are conditioned to fear the presence of the ghost, but experienced investigators will tell you that the moment the ghost leaves can be the most unnerving part of the entire experience. There's a documented case from a family in rural Iowa in the 1980s who were tormented for over a year by a violent poltergeist. It threw objects, started small fires, and whispered threats from empty corners. They lived in a state of constant siege. Then, one Tuesday, it just stopped. The house fell silent. The family, instead of celebrating, fell into a deep paranoia. They became obsessed with the reason for its departure. Did it leave on its own? Did they do something to anger it into leaving? And would that anger bring it back in a more violent form? Or, the worst fear of all, had it not left at all, but was simply hiding, watching, waiting? The silence drove them from the house more effectively than the violence ever did. You and Mrs. Gable are living in that same paranoid silence. The nightly terror was, at least, a known quantity. It had rules, a schedule, a routine. You knew what to expect. This new quiet is a vast, shapeless unknown. Why did it stop? Was it because Mrs. Gable almost reached it? Was that the goal all along? To bring one of the witnesses to the brink, and having succeeded, the performance was over? Or was it an act of mercy? Did some part of the entity see the elderly woman walking to her doom and decide to pull back? That seems unlikely, given its previous actions. A far more disturbing theory begins to form in your mind. What if the truck didn't just stop? What if its mission changed? What if the goal of the nightly parade was to prime the street, to saturate it with a specific frequency of fear and sorrow? The music, the empty seat, the darkness, they were all part of a long, slow, magical working. And maybe, with Mrs. Gable's walk to the curb, the ritual was finally complete. The truck is no longer needed, because the work is done. It has successfully turned your quiet suburban street into a permanent locus of dread, a place forever marked and tainted by its presence. It doesn't need to haunt the street anymore, because it has instilled the haunting into the very atmosphere of the place, and into the minds of those who remain. This concept recalls an old esoteric belief about the creation of haunted places. The theory posits that powerful spirits don't just happen upon a location, they consecrate it for their own purposes through repeated rituals. Much like a church is made holy through repeated prayer and ceremony, a place can be made unholy through repeated acts of terror and despair. The nightly drive-by was a black sacrament. The truck was the priest, the music was the hymn, and your fear was the offering. Now that the consecration is complete, the priest can leave. the church is built. And so you are left with the silence. A silence that is not empty, but full of questions. Every night, the memory of what is not there is a ghost in itself. You find yourself straining your ears at 3 a.m., listening for a sound that you prayed would go away, and whose absence is now a source of a new, more profound anxiety. The question that hangs in the heavy quiet of Cedar Lane is no longer about the nature of the entity, but about its motives. Why build this church of fear? Why turn this small corner of the world into a permanent monument to sorrow and then simply walk away? What is the purpose of a haunted place if the ghost itself is gone? The silence offers no answers, and that is the most frightening part of all. The silence holds for a week of tense, watchful quiet, a week where 3 a.m. comes and goes with nothing but the hum of the refrigerator and the sigh of the wind. You start to believe it might actually be over. The oppressive fear begins to recede, replaced by the faint, fragile green shoots of normalcy. You sleep through the night for the first time in months. You have a conversation with a neighbor about property taxes that feels blessedly, beautifully mundane. The Church of Fear, it seems, has been decommissioned before its first service. And then, on the 8th night, a new sound begins. It's nothing like the truck's jingle. There is no melody, no warning, no grand announcement. It starts so quietly, you think you're dreaming it. It's a soft, rhythmic, scraping sound. It sounds like it's coming from right outside your bedroom window. Scrape, 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 like a single dry leaf being dragged across the window screen by the breeze. You lie in bed, your eyes wide open in the darkness, listening. But the sound is too steady, too rhythmic to be the wind. It has a deliberate, mechanical quality. You slip out of bed, your heart beginning its familiar heavy thud. You creep to the window, your movements slow, cautious. You don't know what you expect to see. A tree branch? An animal? You part the blinds just a fraction of an inch and peer out into the darkness of your own backyard, and you see nothing. The lawn is empty. The trees are still. The fence is just a dark line in the gloom. But the sound is still there. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It's close, so close. You press your ear to the cold glass of the window pane, trying to pinpoint the source. And then you realize it's not coming from outside. It's coming from inside your room. You pull back from the window as if you've been burned. You stand in the center of your bedroom, your head turning, trying to locate the sound. It's everywhere and nowhere at once. It's a tiny, persistent, maddening noise that seems to exist only in the air around you. The absence of the truck was a relief, but this new phenomenon is a violation of a different order. The truck was an external threat. It stayed on the street. It kept its distance. There was a barrier, your walls, your windows, your front door between you and it. This new sound has breached the perimeter. It's inside your house. It's in your sanctuary. It has crossed the threshold. The next morning, you call Mrs. Gable. Your hand is shaking as you dial her number. She answers, and you don't even have to ask. Her voice is a thin, terrified whisper. "Do you hear it?" she asks. "The scratching? It's in the walls. It sounds like a mouse, but it's not a mouse. You both heard it. The phenomenon hasn't ended. It has evolved. It has become more intimate, more personal." This transition from an external, localized haunting to an internal, pervasive one is a terrifying escalation often reported in severe paranormal cases. It signifies a shift in the entity's focus. There's a documented investigation from the 1970s of a family in Germany known as the Rosenheim poltergeist case that started with strange phenomena at the father's workplace, lights flickering, phones ringing inexplicably. But over time, the activity followed the family home. It began with knocks on the walls, then paintings flying off hooks, then personal objects moving on their own. The haunting was no longer attached to a place, it was attached to them. They had become the locus of the haunting. The entity had marked them, and now it could follow them anywhere. This is what has happened on Cedar Lane. The truck was the delivery system. It brought the entity to the street. and its nightly ritual was a way of forging a connection, a psychic link, with the chosen witnesses. Now that the connection is established, the truck is no longer necessary. The entity has a direct line. It can bypass the street, the lawn, the walls, and manifest directly inside your home, inside your personal space. Over the next few nights, the sound changes. The scraping is sometimes joined by a soft, wet clicking noise. Sometimes it's a faint, high-pitched whine, like feedback from a hearing aid. These are not the grand, terrifying sounds of a classic haunting. There are no ghostly wails or rattling chains. These are small, intimate, biological sounds. They are the sounds of something else being alive in the quiet spaces of your home, in the walls, in the attic, under the floorboards. The horror is in their subtlety. It's a quiet invasion that is slowly eroding your sense of safety and solitude. A strange, hyper-local anecdote comes to mind. A story your father once told you about his own childhood home. The house was old, and for a whole winter, the family kept hearing a strange tapping sound in the living room wall. They assumed it was pipes, or the house settling. It was annoying, but they got used to it. The next summer, they renovated the room and tore down the wall. Inside, they found a bird skeleton. A sparrow had somehow gotten trapped inside the wall cavity the previous fall and had spent the last days of its life tapping against the drywall, trying to get out. My father said the most haunting part was knowing that for months, they had been listening to the sound of a creature dying just inches away from them, completely oblivious. This is the feeling you have now. You are listening to the sounds of something that is trapped with you. Or perhaps, you are the one who is trapped. The sounds are a constant reminder that you are not alone, that the entity from the truck is now your silent, unseen roommate. The silence was a false peace. It was simply the sound of the entity changing its tactics, moving from a siege to an infiltration. The question this new phase raises is the most personal and terrifying yet. What is the ultimate goal of this intimacy? The truck was a performance, a spectacle meant to be watched from a distance. This is something else entirely. This is about proximity. It has moved from the street to your home. Where will it move next? Will the sounds remain just sounds, or are they a prelude to something else? A sign that the entity is getting closer, testing the boundaries, seeing how much you can take before you break. It has moved from your street to your yard to your walls. The terrifying, logical next step is from the walls into the room itself. The small, intimate sounds, the scraping, the clicking, the whining become the new, unbearable normal. They are not constant, which is perhaps the most maddening part. They come and go, without reason. A soft scratching from the corner of the ceiling at midnight. A faint, wet popping sound from beneath the floorboards just before dawn. You've become hyper-vigilant, your ears always straining, trying to catch and identify each new noise. Sleep is a shallow, nervous state, easily broken by the slightest unfamiliar sound. Your home, once a sanctuary, has become a source of constant, low-grade anxiety. You are living inside a drum, and the entity can tap on it whenever it pleases. Mrs. Gable is not coping well. The sounds have targeted her more aggressively. She calls you, crying, in the middle of the day. She says she heard the faint sound of the ice cream truck's jingle coming from her own disconnected, antique radio in the living room. Another time, she swears she heard the soft whisper of David coming from the mouthpiece of her telephone, even though no one was on the line. The entity is no longer just making random noises in her house. It's using the objects of her life, the familiar technology of her home, to replay its greatest hits. It's a cruel, targeted campaign of psychological warfare. This progression marks the final, devastating phase of the haunting. It has moved beyond a place-based haunting, the street, and a person-based haunting, the sounds following you, into what paranormal researchers call an object-based, or imprinted, haunting. This is the theory that a powerful entity can imbue inanimate objects with its energy or intent. The most famous example of this is the Annabelle doll, a Raggedy Ann doll claimed by demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren to be manipulated by an inhuman spirit. The doll itself was not the entity, but a conduit, a physical anchor point for the spirit to interact with our world. The entity on Cedar Lane is now treating the mundane objects of your homes, radios, phones, the very walls themselves as its own personal Annabelle dolls. The long-term effects of this constant, low-level torment are devastating. The street itself begins to look sick. The community, once fractured by belief and disbelief, is now united in a desire to leave. For sale, signs begin to pop up like mushrooms after a rain. The house where Kevin lived, the young couple with the baby, even a family who claimed they never heard or saw a thing, they all put their houses on the market. They may not have experienced the phenomena directly, but the psychic poison has seeped into the soil of the neighborhood. The palpable fear radiating from you and Mrs. Gable, the hushed, strange stories, the general air of wrongness, it's enough. No one wants to live in a place that feels so fundamentally unhappy. You find a chilling historical parallel in the story of the village of Kuldara in Rajasthan, India. In the 19th century, Kuldara was a prosperous village that was, according to legend, abandoned overnight. All 1,500 residents vanished in a single night, leaving their homes and belongings behind. The local legend claims the village was cursed by a malevolent local ruler. But the curse wasn't one of death or destruction. It was a curse of unbearable sorrow. The story goes that the very air of the village became so heavy with despair and anxiety that it was physically impossible to live there without going mad. The residents simply fled to escape the suffocating emotional atmosphere. To this day, Kuldara is a ghost town, and locals claim that anyone who tries to spend the night there is driven out by an overwhelming and inexplicable feeling of dread. Cedar Lane is becoming a modern-day Kuldara. It's a place being rendered uninhabitable by a feeling. You and Mrs. Gable are the last of the original witnesses. You talk about leaving, of course. You look at listings in other towns. You dream of a quiet street where the silence is just silence. But you are both trapped. You by a mortgage and the grim financial reality of selling a house on a street that is rapidly gaining a dark reputation. Mrs. Gable, by age and infirmity. She has lived in her home for 50 years. It is her entire world. Leaving is not an option for her. She is a prisoner in her own haunted memory box. The street is a shell of its former self. The lawns grow a little too long. The houses for sale sit empty, their dark windows like vacant eyes. The families who remain are insular, quiet. The friendly waves and neighborhood barbecues are a distant memory. The phantom ice cream truck has won. It didn't need to destroy the street with fire or flood. It destroyed it with a sound, with a memory, with a feeling. It killed a community by poisoning its sense of peace, its sense of safety. The haunting of Cedar Lane is not just about a ghost. It's about the slow, methodical murder of a neighborhood. The ultimate aftermath is a street frozen in time, permanently marked by the events that transpired. It is now a local legend in the making, a place that future teenagers will whisper about. Don't go down Cedar Lane at night, they'll say. You can still hear things. The entity has achieved a dark kind of immortality. It has woven itself into the fabric of the town's folklore. And it leaves you, the last keeper of the full story, with the final, bitter question. Was this the goal all along? Not to take souls, not to feed on fear, but simply to create a monument. To take a perfectly normal, happy, suburban street and turn it into a permanent, self-sustaining ghost story, a place that will forever carry the echo of its sorrow, long after the last witness is gone. You find a chilling historical parallel in the story of the village of Kuldara in Rajasthan, India. In the 19th century, Kuldara was a prosperous village that was, according to legend, abandoned overnight. All 1,500 residents vanished in a single night, leaving their homes and belongings behind. The local legend claims the village was cursed by a malevolent local ruler. But the curse wasn't one of death or destruction. It was a curse of unbearable sorrow. The story goes that the very air of the village became so heavy with despair and anxiety that it was physically impossible to live there without going mad. The residents simply fled to escape the suffocating emotional atmosphere. To this day, Kuldara is a ghost town, and locals claim that anyone who tries to spend the night there is driven out by an overwhelming and inexplicable feeling of dread. Cedar Lane is becoming a modern-day Kuldara. It's a place being rendered uninhabitable by a feeling. You and Mrs. Gable are the last of the original witnesses. You talk about leaving, of course. You look at listings in other towns. You dream of a quiet street where the silence is just silence. But you are both trapped. You by a mortgage and the grim financial reality of selling a house on a street that is rapidly gaining a dark reputation. Mrs. Gable by age and infirmity. She has lived in her home for 50 years. It is her entire world. Leaving is not an option for her. She is a prisoner in her own haunted memory box. The street is a shell of its former self. The lawns grow a little too long. The houses for sale sit empty, their dark windows like vacant eyes. The families who remain are insular, quiet. The friendly waves and neighborhood barbecues are a distant memory. The phantom ice cream truck has won. It didn't need to destroy the street with fire or flood. It destroyed it with a sound, with a memory, with a feeling. It killed a community by poisoning its sense of peace, its sense of safety. The haunting of Cedar Lane is not just about a ghost. It's about the slow, methodical murder of a neighborhood. The ultimate aftermath is a street frozen in time, permanently marked by the events that transpired. It is now a local legend in the making, a place that future teenagers will whisper about. Don't go down Cedar Lane at night, they'll say. You can still hear things. The entity has achieved a dark kind of immortality. It has woven itself into the fabric of the town's folklore. And it leaves you, the last keeper of the full story, with the final bitter question. Was this the goal all along? Not to take souls, not to feed on fear, but simply to create a monument? To take a perfectly normal, happy suburban street and turn it into a permanent, self-sustaining ghost story. A place that will forever carry the echo of its sorrow, long after the last witness is gone. Years pass. The world moves on, but Cedar Lane remains suspended in a state of quiet decay. Most of the original families are long gone, replaced by a transient population of renters or buyers who got a deal they couldn't refuse and don't ask too many questions. The street never fully recovered. It carries a stigma, a quiet reputation as that weird street. The lawns are a little shabbier, the paint a little more peeled. It is a place that feels permanently tired. You stayed. You couldn't afford to leave, and over time, a strange, resilient numbness set in. The intrusive sounds, the scraping and clicking, never truly went away, but they faded, becoming a kind of psychic tinnitus you learn to live with. They are the background static of your life now, a constant, low-level reminder of the events that transpired. Mrs. Gable passed away peacefully in her sleep 5 years after the truck stopped coming. Her house was sold to a developer who tore it down and built a new, modern box that looks alien and out of place, a scar on the landscape of your memory. You are the last one. The sole archivist of the haunting of Cedar Lane. The truck never returned. The silence of 3 a.m. has held for years, but its absence is a monument. The story has, as you predicted, seeped into local legend. It's a twisted, simplified version now, told by kids who dare each other to ride their bikes down the street after dark. In their version, it's the ghost of a murdered ice cream man who drives his truck looking for revenge. The details are wrong, but the core truth remains. Something is wrong with this street. The entity achieved its goal. It created a self-perpetuating ghost story. But as the keeper of the full, true narrative, you are left to contemplate the ultimate, unanswerable questions. The ones that still keep you awake on nights when the silence feels particularly loud. What was the entity? And what, in the end, did the darkness want? Was it all for David? Was the entire decades-long phenomenon simply the complex, tortured echo of a single tragic event? A psychic scar left on the fabric of time and place, replaying itself with increasing malevolence? In this version, the entity is a mindless automaton of sorrow, a system caught in a feedback loop of grief. The truck, the music, the void, they are all just fragments of a single, terrible moment, cursed to repeat forever. This is the most comforting explanation, in a way. It implies a lack of intelligence, a lack of malice. It is a tragedy, not an attack. Or was David just the beginning? Was his disappearance in 1978 not the cause of the haunting, but merely its first successful act on this particular stage? This theory posits a much older, more predatory entity, a being, like the collector of sorrows from the old farm legend, that has existed in this place for centuries. It saw the new development, the arrival of families, of children, of a cheerful ice cream man, and it saw an opportunity. It co-opted the symbols of this new Eritha truck. The Jingland used them as a new lure, a new mask for its ancient hunger. In this version, David was not the reason for the haunting. He was simply its first suburban victim. The entity is not an echo. It is a predator that has learned to adapt its hunting methods. And what of the darkness? That perfect, light-eating void in the back of the truck. Was it just a symbol, a manifestation of the entity's empty, sorrowful nature? Or was it, as you feared, a place, an aperture, a doorway to somewhere else? If so, what is that place? Is it a kind of supernatural oubliette, a prison where the souls it collects David's, and perhaps others before him are kept? Or is it not a prison, but a home? Is the entity itself not the truck, but the darkness? And the truck is merely the vehicle it uses to move its home from one place to another, a hermit crab carrying its abyssal shell. This leads to the final, most terrifying question of all, the one that lies at the heart of the entire mystery. What is its ultimate purpose? If it's a predator, why did it stop hunting? It had misses, Gable, ready to be taken, and it retreated. If it's an echo, why did it evolve, changing its tactics from the truck to the sounds inside your walls? None of the simple explanations fully fit the complex, contradictory nature of the phenomena. It demonstrated intelligence, then acted like a mindless loop. It showed predatory intent, then displayed something that could almost be mistaken for mercy. Perhaps the purpose was something far more alien than collecting souls or feeding on fear. Perhaps its goal was simply to communicate, in the only way it knew how. Perhaps the distorted music, the empty seat, the whispered name, the intimidating displays of power, and the final, quiet infiltration were all part of a long, clumsy, terrifying attempt to say something, to tell a story, to describe its own nature. Maybe it was simply saying, I am here, I am empty, I am old, I am sorrowful, and now, so is this place. It was not a haunting in the traditional sense. It was an act of artistic creation, a performance piece where the stage was your street, the actors were your fears, and the final artwork was the permanent, indelible stain of dread left on the community. It didn't want to take you. It wanted to change you. It wanted to make you, and the very ground beneath your feet, a part of its own endless, silent, sorrowful song. You look out your window at the quiet, lonely street. The ghost is gone, but the haunting is everywhere, and you understand that the true nature of the void is not to consume, but to infect, to leave a little piece of its absolute emptiness behind in everything it touches. The truck may be gone, but the darkness it carried is still here. It's in the empty houses, in the fearful silence, and in the corner of your own heart that will, forever, be waiting for 3 a.m. The silence left behind by a haunting is often a more profound and lasting scar than the noise ever was. The phenomenon on Cedar Lane was never just about a phantom truck. It was about the insidious way that fear can dismantle a community, poisoning the very soil of a place until all that can grow there is sorrow and suspicion. The story of the truck becomes a modern folktale, a cautionary whisper that reminds us how fragile our sense of safety truly is, and how easily the cherished symbols of our innocence can be hollowed out and worn as a mask by things we cannot and should not ever hope to understand. The ultimate question isn't whether the ghost was real, but whether the quiet, empty street it left behind is any less haunted. The real horror lies not in the brief, terrifying appearance of the monster, but in the slow, creeping, permanent decay it leaves in its wake, an echo that fades but never truly disappears. It lingers in the too long shadows of the afternoon, in the flicker of a streetlight that seems to watch you as you pass, and in the deep, dreamless part of your sleep where you can still, if you listen very carefully, hear the faint, discordant notes of a long-forgotten summer song. And so we are left with the quiet aftermath, contemplating not the ghost, but the shape of the hole it left behind in the world, a void that continues to radiate a cold and inexplicable sadness.